to be at this multiple disciplinary conference once again. Like you, many of you for sure, I spend my time doing my research course in physics, but I'm extremely concerned about efficacious teaching and critical thinking of my students and critical thinking of myself. So this talk, STEM education talk then, I want to talk about effective teaching and accelerated learning through Piaget and Popper constructivism when using mental structures and critical thinking. Well, my realization over these many decades now is that I see structures in everything I do. I see patterns and structures. And so I believe that I learn best when I do that. And so I'm now teaching my students to create mental structures as new concepts are taught to them. And don't try to learn one new concept all by itself, but it must be integrated very quickly with something that you already have a relationship with in order to retain it. So let me get started here then. I think I'll skip most of the abstract. It is in the booklet. So the abstract, engaging students to teach them new concepts is the primary goal of college education. Yet achieving this goal in science and engineering and other disciplines is often a form of a task for teachers and their students. We have developed a practice that achieved this goal, in my opinion, through constructivism. Although this word is almost nebulous in meaning, in my mind, I have some concrete understanding of what constructivism means, which requires the integration of in-depth knowledge of a topic, an adequate delivery, receiving method for what is being taught or learned, and the development of mental structures to retain better newly acquired knowledge. If so, as soon as you get something new, some pattern needs to be created in order to retain it. So as a strong advocate myself of Piaget and Popper constructivism, we observe that the model gives a basis for understanding intellectual acquisition of new knowledge and its distribution through efficacious teaching. So we have developed mnemonics, acronyms, simple patterns, mental patterns of the mind called mental hooks and straits to assist instructors in teaching or students in learning. So this is a parallel presentation in the sense that students can use this for critical thinking, and teachers can use this for efficacious teaching. So something has happened here. I think I see. Okay. So the onset of cognitive thinking and learning begin with recording, valuing, comparing, and contrasting events of situations. We have found that once mental structures are developed in the mind or incorporated or used by instructor, the instructor teaching is enhanced. Or when used by students in the learning process, their critical thinking is expanded, accelerated, even when only one or sequential new concepts are being taught. I also came to understand this last semester that many new concepts being introduced in my class in a sequential manner throws many students in a tailspin. They can't get the first one before the second, and that leads to a great deal of frustration for some of the students. But yet others are absorbing everything that I put out in a very clear way. So we have made the connection between how efficacious teaching is enhanced from the integration of critical thinking, adequate delivery system, and mental structures. I think that both early career instructors and students desire to achieve effective teaching and learning, respectively, can benefit from this type of constructivism. So I'm going to give here some abstract motivation, a little background, and illustration of these types of mental structures and conclusion. Why do this? What is the motivation that I have? How to enhance or accelerate the retention of new-to-learn concepts. That's my main concern for myself and for the young people that I am constantly in front of. How to motivate students at the collegiate level, especially underserved students. I teach so many underserved students that have the notion of, I cannot do this. And most of my greatest task is to reverse that somehow misconception and to get him or her on to the path of learning effectively. But I need to do that at the same time keeping the highly intelligent students in the same class motivated. How to improve the delivery of new knowledge. Just to have it and not be able to provide it is not much good. What is the meaning of this constructivism? What role did Poppy play in his three-world view? And mostly it's this falsifiability, if I don't get back to that. He added that portion that I think is critical. And how do structures come into play? And what are mental structures? How do mental structures assist in learning and retaining new concepts? Critical thinking is that model of thinking about a subject, content, or problem in which the individuals improve the quality of his or her thinking by skillfully analyzing, assessing, and reconstructing. So these mental structures then, as a set of techniques, are the basic mental process people employ to make sense of information. And these can be grouped in these three categories. I'm going to focus mostly on the symbolic representation in this presentation. At the heart of everything, though, is Bloom's cognitive taxonomy. I don't have to talk about that. I think all of us in this room can appreciate the importance of Bloom's work back in the mid-50s. However, I have found that in many of my upper level classes, I go straight to Bloom's taxonomy. I do not have to spend time with motivation, but other classes I have to deal with the affective domain in order to get to the cognitive domain. So students have to come ready to receive information. They have to learn how to respond, valuing, organization, characterization. All that is under Bloom's affective domain, but I maintain that it is an integrated aspect to be successful at teaching and or learning cognitively at the collegiate level. So, constructivism versus mental structures. Learning is not just a mechanical process, we all know that. The received information must be valued and processed and integrated in some coherent way with what is already known, or else it's not retained. Some researchers have had the misconception that students can be receptive of knowledge rather than active learning. It is this latter portion here that is so very critical. It can be argued that constructivism can provide the foundation that guides the entire learning process of new concepts and mental mind structures, as I said, and word association in order to get from step A to step B so that you can retain enough to get on to learning the concepts. These mental structures need to be done as far as I'm concerned. So mental structures are used to create meaning from processing information by making connections, by finding patterns, if you see patterns, identifying rules, structures, abstracting principles, all of that helps out. So I'm going to give a few quick mental structures from some examples that I'm going to take from mathematics, physics, and chemistry. There are 10 basic clouds in the atmosphere, and some may have heard this before, seen my work on this. But as soon as so 10 clouds in my physical science 101 class, how am I going to remember 10 clouds? And so immediately there are 3 high-level clouds, cirrus, and cirrocumulus and cirrostratus. There are 2 mid-level clouds, alto, and right away, and there are 5 low-level clouds. So right away, as soon as the kid gets the notion that there is a structure here, half of the game has already been won, because now he has this word alto that's associated with mid-level, and so he knows those. There are only 2 there, 3 there, so that pattern helps him. Now, he doesn't know what a cirrus cloud is necessarily, but he knows 5, or 6, or 10 of these, 3, 2, 5. Then you can learn the specificity of each of them, and there are color in these clouds too. So as this alto cumulus here turns black, it is generally white or silvery, but turn black and you're ready for a tornado or extremely bad weather. So the youngster then, once he gets this, then he can get some understanding of all of these. These are these various kinds of clouds, so you see some pattern of them. There are 3 here, 2 there, and 5 there. So while this is the introduction, there are 5 at the bottom, 2 mid-level, 3 level. Now go and learn some things about these 10 clouds and have a connection. So my point is, learning about one of them is less effective than trying to learn about 10. You can retain some, the 10, as you categorize and see what each of them do, you know what is going on there. This is now from organic chemistry. This word Naples is so well known all over the world. So in a NAPLC, nucleic acids, proteins, lipids, and carbohydrates, those are the 4 main organic molecules in the human body. And so just by having a word association with Naples, you effectively have a way of assigning these 4 categories of molecules that's critical. And then you go and you learn. Then you learn. But you've gotten the start of this with just this simple structure and word association between NAPLC and Naples that you're able to do. Also from organic chemistry, his CCE, these are these 6 structures here: hydroxyls, ethers, aldehydes, carbonyls, carboxyls, and esters. But he's CCE. So you can create that pattern just simply first letter of each of the principal grouping. You still don't know anything about the organic chemistry, but you know that these categories are there. Then you can then begin to find out what are the alcohols, what are their specificity, and go through all of those, and you learn something. But you start with some pattern, then you can move on to the connection. From physics and chemistry here, everyone will recognize that this is a critical minus sign here. The integral, the sine of theta d theta is minus cosine theta plus c. And the minus sign goes here and the minus sign there and there. So I tell my students in my A&M class, electricity and magnetism, if you know one of these, doggone it, you know all 4 of them. Because if you put the minus sign with this one, then you know if you integrate this one and get that, if you differentiate this, you get that. So you have those 2, then you know those 2 as well. So the pattern then helps you to retain all of that, as opposed to trying to say just one of them. Now, there's a whole level of limiting process behind each of the integration process. So I'm not talking about the mathematics behind this. I'm talking more or less right now on retaining the word association and what you should get if you perform that integration. I studied these solitons as well, and they're what we call these Klein-Gorton solitons from nonlinear Klein-Gorton equation. This is the equations itself. There are three perturbation terms over here, and what you can do is create some pattern that you can have, that the alpha term here is related to charge density of the wave, and that will diminish the quality of the wave. Beta is related to dissipative losses in the Josephson junction when the particle is traveling there, and the alpha term is lost due to current. But my point is you create some pattern, and then you can have some understanding about all of that. Quantum structure is, so there are basically 4 quantum equations in quantum mechanics. The Schrodinger equation, this one is the most fundamental, but if you know then, if you learn this one, then there's a pattern. Let me see, I'm sorry. Okay, I don't have the pattern here, but you learned something about, this is the fundamental one. This equation here is a relativistic equation for the particle has no spin. This is the relativistic equation where the particle has spin, and this is the non-relativistic. This is Pauli equation. So you learn all 4 of them. Now this is the one that we use most often, but you know all 4 exist. Let me just tell you, we're often talking about climate change. There are 3 basic natural features that cause climate change, and they are then the sun energy output varies in 11-year cycle. But these 3 here, where is the word? Tilt, let me see. 3 other leading causes of climate change. There they are. TTS. The tilt of the Earth's axis, the time of year that the Earth is closest to the sun, which can vary, and the change in the shape of the orbit. When those 3 change and get synchronized in a certain way, we can have then extremely cold weather, extremely hot weather, and so some of the ice ages in the past have occurred when these 3 synchronize. My point is that, leaving off the sunspot issue, if you just have a word association, TTS, so you got then immediately tilt of the Earth axis relative to its orbit and relative to the sun rays, time of year that is closest to the sun, and changing the shape. This structure here, in my mind, helps to keep the information so that you can really learn something about it. So having said that then, Constructivism, in my opinion, is a value tool for effective, efficacious teaching and or accelerated learning. Mental structures then of constructivism may be grouped in these 3 categories, as we've said, and they are here again, but I focus on this symbolic representation. Of course, this is a work in process. I'm still writing and doing more on this work. Mental structures then can be developed, such as what I've called here, these hooks, straights, S, et cetera, to aid critical thinking and gaining importance for helping students to accelerate the learning of new concepts and helping teachers to be more efficacious. Efficacious teaching is far more important. Who would care how much physics I know if I can't tell my youngsters in my class? They don't care about mine. In fact, I think you were also saying, I'm going off subject here, but the idea is that I have to have some skills to be able to put the information at a receivable level. And that's been my task, to learn how to do that more efficaciously. So there's some literature cited here, and on and on. And acknowledgments, thanks go to the physics department, of course, for its continued support of this research agenda that I have, this STEM education that's important to me. My collaborators, of course, colleagues, and my students that I learned so much from. And of course, I have grants from NASA RISE, and NASA NSF. And question, please, and I thank you so much.